This is Chris Hicks, and I want to welcome you to the first ever Clermont U podcast live stream. And I think it's going to be a good one tonight with some great panel members that might be an odd couple that you never expected to see in the first ever Clermont U panel discussion. We're going to talk about the judicial system a little bit tonight. I'm going to bring the panel on in just a second. And when we do, we're going to talk about what we're going to plan to do on every episode of Clermont U, which will be to give you a little bit of education, talk about what some of the issues that are going on in Clermont County are, and then talk about how you might be able to get involved. And one of the ways you can get involved is if whatever we talk about, you have information on, you feel like you have expertise or you have a topic that should be covered on Clermont U, send an email to this email address, ClermontU@reformclermontgop.com. That's ClermontU@reformclermontgop.com. Whenever you do, try to be specific and include documents with whatever you're providing. So welcome to the first ever Clermont U. This was an idea of somebody who attended the Reform the Clermont GOP event in July, I think it was, or June. And so hopefully this will be a good experience for everyone. We're going to try to go quick and only be about 30 minutes, but we all have good points we want to make on the panel, and we'll see how good we do at sticking to that. Here's what our agenda is going to be. We're going to talk about the courts and the judges. We're going to talk about current issues in the court system in Clermont County, the judicial appointment meeting that's happening on Saturday, how you can be involved, and Bill Thomas is going to provide an update on his Chris Hicks Loss Scoreboard, where I think the last time I saw it, I was 0 for 22, and we'll see where it goes from there. So let me bring on the panel right now. We have Louisa McQueen and Bill Thomas. And how are you guys doing this evening?
Hi.
Good.
So what we're going to do is, for everybody, is we're going to first talk about each of the courts. And these are the basic courts. We have municipal, common pleas, juvenile probate, which are two courts, but they're together in Clermont County, domestic relations, and the court of claims. And we're going to kind of split them up a little bit. And Bill, you're going to start out with talking about municipal and common pleas court, just to educate people a little bit on what the structure of those courts is.
Right. So I think some people are familiar with municipal and common pleas because they cover a wider variety of things that may happen, traffic citations. You're going to be in municipal court, domestic violence type things will be through municipal court. And then common pleas are more of the felonies. So you got the misdemeanors and then the felonies are over in common pleas. For more serious crimes, civil cases, the small claims cases are heard in municipal, but for the larger claims, they'll go over to common pleas. And then there's different sets of judges. And typically what you'll find is those judges that go to common pleas started out in municipal. For example, Victor Haddad, I was graduating high school when he started in municipal court many years ago in Clermont County, and then worked his way into common pleas. And now he's considered what's called the administrative judge in common pleas. So if you had to call one judge as kind of the leader, the administrative judge, Victor would be Judge Haddad would be the one that would be in that position.
And I think they rotate those every year or so. They switch out who the...
Right. Currently, he's the administrative judge. I obviously won't know who the next one will be, but that flips up. And, we have, I feel in common pleas, like Judge Miles, he's very fair and probably one of the best judges we have. I've always and have said that I would see Kevin Miles as a candidate for Supreme Court justice. Certainly have opinions about some of the ones that have been appointed. I think Kevin would make a better judge, but municipal, a lot of people know about municipal because if you get a speeding ticket and you take it to court, you're going to go through municipal. And a lot of times things are heard from magistrates. So, when you go to municipal court, you don't always hear from a judge. More of the first degree, second degree misdemeanors, more of the higher criminal offenses go to the judges, more of the traffic citations, civil cases. Those are all typically heard by magistrates. and those magistrates work under a judge. It's kind of like when you go to the doctor's office, you see a nurse practitioner or physician assistant 9 times out of 10 any longer. You rarely see an actual medical doctor, but medical doctors are monitoring the charts, monitoring the diagnoses. They're signing off on what the PAs and NPs are doing. Same thing for, the magistrates. Their oversight is on the judges. So if you have a magistrate, you appeal a decision, it's going to go to that magistrate's judge.
So the municipal court is the building down by the sheriff's office and the jail. Common Pleas is in Batavia. And I put on here, Bill, and you might want to comment on this. I put PO after each of these. That means they came from the prosecutor office. So you might want to say something about kind of the history of how people get to be judges.
So, yeah, it's kind of a funny story. So when Don White was a prosecutor, as far back as I go, and Don White knew everybody. And, all the judges knew Don White. They all have history. Mark Ticalby started in the prosecutor's office many years ago. I'm just taking a wild guess, but I would say probably 20 years or longer ago, and worked in the prosecutor's office. So many of these judges, like you have here next to PO, they worked with Mark Ticalby. Mark Ticalby may have been the assistant prosecutor at the time, or he may have had oversight over these judges, had authority. For example, Kevin Miles worked under Mark Ticalby, had a very solid business relationship. And I find that oftentimes what will happen is you develop these relationships, these longstanding relationships, and I feel like you lose some sort of unbiasedness from the judge. Like, for example, prosecutor's office, sheriff's department's coming for a warrant, and the prosecutor's office goes to the judges. I need a warrant. You expect the judges to really question, what do you need the warrant for? Have you done your due diligence? Warrants are not supposed to just be freely given out, because warrants typically violate your rights, but they're in place because sometimes your rights need to be violated. If you committed a crime, a murder, something like that, you need a warrant to go collect the evidence. So oftentimes, because of the relationships, and I don't think this is just a Clermont County thing, I think this is across the board in the judicial system, you'll find that warrants will typically, because of the relationships, there's this trust. When you work with somebody for 20 years, you just develop a relationship, you trust them, you think they're bringing to you what you need to do, and probably 99.9% of the time, they actually need the warrant, or there's no cover up, or there's nothing going on. It's that 1% is where we find that people are getting indicted, government officials getting indicted, people working for the government getting indicted because, they've built this trust and they slide one under. And that's the problem, is there should be checks and balances 100% of the time.
So somebody said to me once that and we're going to move on. At some point, we're going to have what we think are some of the problems across the courts amongst us. But so right now, we're just trying to be educational. But that when you have the judges like this, Anita Beckman, I believe, is the only one that did not come from a history of the prosecutor's office in some way. And somebody pointed out to me one time maybe these people have never been defense attorneys. They don't know what it's like to be on the other side of a case. They're used to being on the side of lock them up or put them in jail. So any comment on that, Bill?
It's funny that you bring that up. I actually made, before I started challenging Ticalby on some things and that were going on in the county, we were pretty close as far as acquaintances. And I made the comment to him one time that I think that every elected official should spend at one point in their term one night in the jail to get what the feel and the experience is like. I won't repeat the response because we're on a live stream, but that was not welcomed. And I think a lot of times these people in these positions, they don't understand what goes on. Like, you don't know what goes on in the jail. They don't, Commissioner Painter doesn't know what it's like to spend the night in our county jail, or our sheriff wouldn't know that because they're on the other side. But sometimes there's things that you need the experience to really understand the need and some things. And, but I did make that suggestion one time and it did not go over very well.
Let's, for just sake of time here, Louisa, you were going to talk about juvenile probate and domestic relations. So why don't you just give a quick, brief education on those courts?
Sure. So Judge Shriver oversees the juvenile and the probate court. Juvenile is for custody, emergency custody, as well as child support. Again, same thing with Judge Shriver. He has magistrates under him, and they typically do the smaller cases, just like the child support and emergency custody. And then Judge Shriver just oversees those cases in his court. Probate court is your general trying to get guardianship over a mentally ill person that's related to you, or maybe a special needs adult that has become an adult now. You would fight that in probate court. And then obviously estates. So if you have a loved one that has passed away, there will be in the estate will take place in the probate court. Domestic relations, we have Marilyn Burke, that is our judge over there. Domestic relations is typically the court that you go to when you want to go get a protective order against someone that you are domestically related to. And I want to say domestically related because we have had, unfortunately, issues in the past with, and personal experience, I speak out of personal experience with this, that people show up at court and they say they're domestically related to someone that they dated, and they an ex and they want to get a protective order. And unfortunately, a lot of these magistrates just hand out these protective orders without actually crossing all the T's and dotting all the I's. And we've run into some issues with the domestic court on that. Same thing in the domestic court. We have a lot of magistrates in the domestic court, and then Marilyn Burke just oversees those cases. That's basically it when it comes to the.
Where are they located? Where are they physically located?
So the juvenile and the domestic court are right across the hallway from each other off Bower Road. They have built a beautiful building that opened up 3 weeks ago. So they are actually taking place in the new building. The new building, we will have the probate court and the juvenile court together, and then domestic court on the other side. The reason for building this massive building that they have down there on Bower Road was so that the probate court could come across the road and be together with the juvenile court, so that the clerks weren't crossing over the road to take care of the cases. So now we have this wonderful facility, and it is very nice. I actually had the pleasure of being in court over child support in juvenile court for the first time when they opened up, and it is a very nice facility.
You know, one thing that's funny is I've never gone and sat in those courts. I've sat some in common pleas court, and I've sat some in some municipal court things. And I just, it crossed my mind, I've never seen a school field trip going to watch courts. Maybe it happens, but you wonder how many, we're not lawyers here, we're not judges, we're not VIPs, but we've all had experiences with some of these courts, and we're not the experts, but we're, hopefully there's some knowledge that's helpful to other people to even, because a lot of citizens don't even know what court's for what, and their worst fear is ever having to interact with one of these courts in the first place. So I'm going to cover real quick, or I'm going to throw it up before we get into what we think some of the problems are. My court was to just talk about as not local, but as the court of claims. And I get a lot of people that come to me talking about how do you get public records? And public records is not done through local courts. It's done through this court that's in Columbus. Happens to be unelected judges. And the pro of it is that it's a form-based process where you don't need a lawyer, and it costs $25. I think the con process to it is that it's unelected judges, and it started, I think, in 2015 or 2016. And I found over time that I believe that it's getting more, I don't want to get into the issues, but maybe a little more beholden to the government than to the citizens in terms of getting records out. But if you have a straightforward records thing, and I put up the email address, and I'll put it back later, is that, some of us on here, if you have questions, if somebody sees us at a question, again, we're not lawyers, we're not experts, but we might be able to point you at least in the right directions. And I certainly have a lot of experience with the Court of Claims and around that and what it does and what it doesn't do. Now, one of the things that we wanted to do here, is we each wanted to talk about, just so people know, we talked a little bit last night, the three of us, and we didn't share this with each other, but we were each going to come up with a couple of issues that we see in the court system, either in the system overall or in a particular court, and then spend a few minutes talking about them. Because if you think about it from a citizen standpoint, there's probably no more important branch of government than courts, because it has the ability to deprive you of property, of rights. And most of us don't even know about it. And most of our judges don't even run in opposed races in Clermont County around the court. So what I'm going to do is, without us talking about this point, I have my little list of a couple things. You know, why don't we just, what are the things? What I'd like to do is just get the things, and I'm going to write them down, and then we'll knock them off one by one to talk about what do we think are some of the potential issues. Louisa, why don't we start with you? What's one of your issues?
My biggest issue with, I guess, with the courts is retaliation. I think that a lot of the times, you know, when we have the general public that aren't familiar with what to do in courts, and, you know, typical first step to do is to get an attorney. A lot of us that have been through the court system, and eventually we just realize that we can represent ourselves. And when we actually point out sometimes issues that, you know, the judges are doing or that our attorneys are doing, and we point it out because we don't think it's fair.
Okay.
It seems like our
So let me just right now, I wrote down retaliation. You've talked some about it. So Bill, what's one of your items?
Are you asking that question specific to any court or
any court or the court overall? What sticks in your mind? If I said, what's the biggest problem with the courts in Clermont County today, what would be the first words out of your mouth?
Ex partes. Ex partes are a huge problem, and they don't just exist in certain courts. I mean, they're primarily, you see them in the domestic court arena for like protection orders or fighting over custody. But just a real quick 30-second rundown on what they are. An ex parte means single. It basically stands for single-sided, one-sided hearing. So anybody can go to court and say, my ex-wife threatened to kill my children. I want to get full custody of them, temporary full custody. You're immediately seen in front of a magistrate, and the other side doesn't get a say until 2 weeks, 30 days. I mean, I've seen them go as long as 45 days because of delays of attorneys being able to have free schedule.
Do you think that that's uniquely a bigger problem in Clermont County than other counties?
I can't speak to other counties. I haven't had the experience with other counties, but it's definitely a problem in this county. And there's no, when I talked to Judge Burke about this, she said that they understand the problem, but you can't get rid of it. Like, you need it because there are certain circumstances where you need to have them. The problem is, and that's fine, I can say, okay, I'm good with that. But if you come to court and you perjure yourself or you lie, what I do believe happens in this county more, because we have a weak prosecutor's office when it comes to holding people
accountable. Nothing happens to you.
Yeah. They never go back and hold the person accountable. Yeah. You know, you say your ex-wife threatened to kill the kids, or I'm sure that's probably more of an extreme, but something lighter, like my ex-wife, you know, beat me up. I need to have my kid. She's aggressive. You get ex-wife comes to court and says, look, there's no evidence of that. I never did that. I never said. And the judge will restore custody, shared parenting or whatever. But the husband or the ex-husband never gets prosecuted, or the ex-wife never gets prosecuted for lying in court. So people know that they can go to court and lie and get away with it. And it happens every day in this county.
Yeah, it's a way of these people using the court to just either get back at an ex or just to retaliate. Sure. But I mean, I've had with our case, we've had someone that got 5 domestic protection orders and got granted, And every single one, every time he got one, it was dismissed. And within another week, he went down, he got another one, it got dismissed. And within another week, he went in 45 days, he got 5 protective orders in our courts.
Not to go off on a tangent, and maybe we'll cover these things as we go here, rather than I was going to make the list and then we'll cover them. But, I have the personal experience of this is when then Commissioner Ubel tried to get a protection order against me. So he went and got a temporary restraining order, which they pretty much rubber stamped because the judges would all be afraid, and maybe rightly so, that if something happened and I hadn't granted it, what happens. But when I talked to a lawyer about it, when it happened, they're like, oh, judges just do this, blah, 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 they're afraid. And then I'm like, well, read what it says. And then to a lawyer, I had like 4 lawyers looking at it. They said, he never alleges any activity in here that would merit this, because there has to be some threat of harm. It was like, I say things that make them uncomfortable in commissioner meetings. And that was literally the way it was written. So the rigor, I think, because of the fear, maybe we always have to just grant them. There's not rigor in terms of, is the person who's coming in requesting this actually, putting forward a meritorious case. So let me hit one of them that are mine. And I put down a general one, as I'd say, in our court system in Clermont County, a lack of independence. I feel like there's a dominance in the court system of people from the prosecutor's office. We have a situation, this is regardless of politics or political affiliation, where I don't know when's the last time we had a general election that had a contested race for a judgeship, or even a primary that had a contested race for a judgeship. And so because of that, I think that the court system is way too beholden to the political system and way too beholden to the prosecutor's office, because part of what happens is that lack of competition in any of the primaries or elections means that the political system has a better stranglehold on it, because the political system can keep people from, make it non-competitive in there. And I just, it's concerning to me. I don't want, left-wing judges or anything, but I'd love to see on the conservative side different lawyers coming forward to want to be judges than we do. I almost feel like sometimes there's not a lot of lawyers that want to come forward. So either of you have any comment on that?
Yeah, I think I'd like to comment on that. I think the biggest problem we have in Clermont County is the buddy system. When you have, prosecutors coming out of the prosecutor's office to become judges, and it seems to be a standard event for them, that if there's a judgeship position open, an automatic prosecutor from prosecutor's office is going to be judge. And what that leads to is complacent, because judges don't have opposing candidates running against them. And I think it makes them lazy. I think that, it doesn't make them fight for the job, just like any other job. If you knew that you had competition, then you would be the best that you could be. But there's no competition here. So when there's no competition and you get judges into these positions, well, guess what happens? Then they're never held accountable for anything that they do wrong.
Well, I love the saying that I've heard before. I'll probably butcher it here, but competition is what, when you have competition, you're always encouraged to do your personal best. When there is no competition, you're never motivated to do your personal best.
And unfortunately, we have a lot of candidates in our county, or officials that have got positions that never had any competition.
So, okay. So, Louisa, that we've each had one. Do you have a second one?
I do. The second one is, especially in juvenile court, the cases are kept in juvenile court for way too long. When you are walking through the front door and those police officers, and you walk in and you start to know the clerks, then you've been there way too long. It costs way too much money to be fighting these things in court. It's ridiculous that you go in and they set it for a hearing. And then you go in for a hearing and you're basically in there for 5 minutes, and it's the attorneys and the judge that has a sidebar conversation, and then they decided to set it for another hearing. I don't understand why this continues like this. It costs people a lot of money when you having to pay an attorney. and it affects people's lives. It affects children's lives. You know, I've often said the amount of money that it's cost me to be in juvenile court, I think that it is it's child abuse, because you've taken away from the child that I've advocated for. You've taken away from that child when you have kept me in court for so long over stupid stuff and over frivolous stuff, because you want to give an opportunity to the other side. Again, when the evidence is in front of you, I don't believe that we go by the law books. I go by, you know what, whoever you're friends with or whoever you pissed off, and you know what, I'm going to decide what's best for you, because you know what, it's happened to me before. I mean, I've had a magistrate, you know, take away my passport. I mean, that's ridiculous. So unfortunately, you know, we don't go by the law books. And that was my question to one of the Supreme Court judges that is running for the Supreme Court is, you know, we have a law book, but we don't go by it. So
Right.
How do I have any faith in the court systems? I don't. I have no faith absolutely in the court system, unfortunately.
Okay. So, Bill, what's your, on that high point of no faith in the court system, Bill, what's your second item you had?
You know, I had several things, and it was really hard to pinpoint another one. But if I had to pick out of all the many issues going on right now, I believe not allowing people to bond out properly. And I think there's like and I don't want to sound like a liberal here, but there is inequality going on in the court system. I think men are treated more harsher than women when it comes to domestic cases. I've sat through many times in a municipal court. I'll sit and go down and watch just randomly on occasion, and I constantly see cases being dismissed when females are on the other side of a domestic violence. But I have spoken to many men that have constantly had the book thrown at them for goofy stuff. But I do believe that does exist. If, for an example, if I had an instance where somebody tried to file a protective order against me and went to court, lied, and pretty much no accountability. But I guarantee you, had the situation been reversed and I went to court and lied, I wonder if the same thing would have been around. But I think if you ask around the county, which I have done as part of Friends of Liberty for many years, I would ask the people that would come, just randomly talk to people. I think the general consensus is there is definitely an inequality against men in this county when it comes to domestic cases.
Do you think that is, before we move on, I tell people all the time that I think in our country today, the biggest issues aren't your race or your religion or your this for, discrimination or what have you, but it's more, are you an insider or you're an outsider? And if you're an insider, whatever your background, you're protected. Basically, you live in a little bit different world than outsiders. And I think you and I are very different, Bill. And that's right. Some people are shocked that we're able to talk to each other here without starting to scream at each other. But we're probably both outsiders, right? Complete, to your point of, if the roles were reversed and you did the same thing, you might be spending a night in jail. I think I might be spending a night in jail. But
I think that we need to go down a small rabbit hole here, and just because I think a lot of people, I don't know how many people are watching, but I think everybody needs to understand a little bit of what's transpired. I know we're going to talk about this in that event that we're going to do in person at the what's the date on that, Chris?
August 31st.
31st. I know we've moved it a little bit, but I do want to touch on that. I think, and this is a nationwide problem, but it exists in this county just as much as it exists nationwide. Democrats and Republicans have been able to cohesively exist for many years in this country. But currently we're divided within our own party. Look at what's going on in the state. Look what's going on in Washington. The Republicans are divided within Republicans. Their moderate Democrats are divided by the extreme liberals. Everything's divided. And that division has been promoted and encouraged and nurtured through the education system, through the political system. But how it exists in Clermont County, which is become very real, like you said, we were on polar opposites. Like, I was riding you every day, you ride me every day, just about. But it was because you've got the Linda Fraley's behind the scenes orchestrating and pulling the strings. And I think what happens, and I don't care who it pisses off that I say that, because it's a real thing and it's a problem. The cancer isn't you or I. The cancer is the people that are creating the division within the party and the division within the committee. There's no doubt in my mind that deep down in Linda Fraley's heart that she wants to do what's right for the Republican Party. I do believe that. The problem is they're so self-indulged and self-righteous, and they think that they're right, that they'll pull these strings and want to control everything. And people like me and others get used to promote that agenda, and nothing but division comes of it. Our party is the most divided in Clermont County that has ever been.
Well, but I think we're going to do a whole thing talking about that on the 31st. Here, as it relates to the courts, I think, that becomes a part of that whole system. And especially when you have courts that are, basically controlled by the political system and the prosecutor's office, you have but you see that behavior manifest itself. It's not the same in every judge, but, I think if there's certain judges, if my name showed up on something, there's going to be a predisposition. I'm not going to say it's good or bad. I'm just going to say there's going to be a predisposition just by name. And I've never been convicted of any crime. I've never been, but there's going to be a predisposition that's driven by that divisive system. Yes,
but Chris, to tie it off, the reason you and I are in this place, which is what I was originally going to answer, is because I think the smartest thing we all can do right now, whether it's in the judicial system or anywhere, is to take and not follow the path of these people that are creating the division, but to say, let things go and unite to try to fix the problems. I mean, if the two of us can sit on a call, then anybody can let things go for the common welfare of what's going on right now. What's going on is bad.
Right.
We're at a very critical point.
All right, Louise, just for sake of time here, because we're past the 30 minutes. But so, Louisa, you had your hand up like you wanted to say.
Well, you were talking about if they saw your name. Well, that's happened to me. I can't go down to municipal court unless I have a visiting judge, which I think is a waste of taxpayers' money, to be totally honest. But once my name, is anything I file in municipal court, my name is flagged, and I need a visiting judge. My question there would be, and I've questioned this before, Bill Thomas and I have had this conversation, are we now going to have a list of people with little red flags next to it in the municipal court or any other courts that every time we file something, whoa, stop, we need a visiting judge? This is crazy, if
what was that judge you had the other day, Louisa, for that seal case? Margaret what?
Margaret Clark, she's a visiting judge.
They almost had to wheel her in a wheelchair. It's crazy.
I just want to make a comment. I had two things, and I was going to hit one or the other. I wasn't decide which one, but I put down unelected judges, and that's what a visiting judge is, an unelected judge that is never subject to the people. At least there's an element, even though we say we don't have competition in the elections, but the judges are on a ballot at some point, and there could be, someday there could be competition. And the Court of Claims, same difference. You have unelected judges that are making these cases. They're never subject to the people. They're in a Court of Claims. You never even see or meet a judge. It's all done on paper. But I think that the unelected judge thing, just so everybody understands the visiting judge aspect, judges, I think, age out when they turn 70 and they can't run for re-election because the system is determined at that point in time, their mental acuities probably diminishing or starting to diminish, and they should just retire. And what do we do in Ohio? They become visiting judges. And so then they go from a mode of they were a regular judge doing judge things every day to now they're aged out. They become a visiting judge. They're only periodically doing stuff, and they have no staff around them, which is a recipe for further diminished skills. And, and then they get paid for, making these appearances and for their travel time and all that sort of stuff. And we would be so better off in Ohio. It's beyond our scope. But if court cases, the visiting judge came from another county or something, another elected judge, but the way it is, you get these older, retired judges that are your visiting judges.
I've been in front of Judge Margaret Clark 3 times, and on 3 different cases, one in juvenile, two in one in small claims, and one yesterday in municipal. And all 3 times, this judge was unprepared. She didn't know what we were talking about. She hadn't looked at the folder. I mean, then what's the use of a visiting judge? I don't need a visiting judge that is going to sit up there and doesn't know what is going on with my
Right.
case. I mean, it's
I
ridiculous.
think also I've had people tell me that visiting judges too, they know where their bread gets buttered per se, and so oftentimes they're maybe not as independent as you might think because
No, not at all.
they know how the system wants them to rule. You know,
And I know that we were trying to keep time, and I don't know, Chris, maybe you were, when you figured we were going to get this done in 30 minutes, you were smoking some of that legalized pot.
I'm not. I guarantee you, I'm ready to be tested.
but I mean, let's just say for this. I mean, I know people are watching because they want to hear certain things. That's why people are watching. I think it's very important to understand the big takeaway here is this just happened this week. I went down with Louisa. Somebody was trying to seal something. She was trying to prevent it. Wasn't a case against her, but the judge didn't even have the file in front of her. Didn't look at it. And the prosecutor had no knowledge of anything that was like there was an investigator in the prosecutor's office, Joe, what was his name? Joe Malott works for the prosecutor's office. The guy did supposedly an investigation, found that there were other victims, but Joe didn't come to court. And this guy came and got his record sealed because the prosecutor's office dropped the ball.
Yeah.
And, you know, we had 2 murder cases this year. One was a hung jury. I don't know where they're going with it. And then Dorman should have got the chair, in my opinion, but now he's going to sit in life in prison. There's not justice where you need justice, and there's injustice where there shouldn't be the justice that's going on. And when I started questioning, like Louisa said, when you start questioning things in this county, you become you
get the red mark next to your name.
You get the red mark. You know,
letter.
Colby won't return a phone call or an email, which, quite frankly, how he feels about me personally at this point is irrelevant. He is an elected official. He has a duty to the people sworn, and that's the problem. Our elected officials do not have I wouldn't say all of them, but there are elected officials in this county that, because how they feel about you, they treat you different as a taxpayer. And that's
so I kind of like we went down this road of unelected officials based, I think, on your point, Bill. So I'm going to sneak in my last point, and then we'll move on from here. But the other point that I had written down was lies, cover-ups, and behavior that's not of the highest moral and ethical standard that the judges should expect from us, and we should expect it from them. And of course, I'm talking about municipal court, and all people have flaws. All people make mistakes. All people do bad things. But I feel like what happened there with Jesse Kramig was a cover-up. There was a cover-up in 2023. Judge Nagel and Judge Beckman, I think, were part of that cover-up. They knew better. I think Stephanie Boyer was part of that cover-up, and it's just the way the system works. And I feel like when then Jesse got caught a year later in a park, that he was immediately gone within 24 hours. He had resigned because he got his one free get out of jail card. And maybe if the system hadn't have protected him as much in 2023, he could have got rehabilitated in some way, or it could have been dealt with. But it also shows the bizarre arrogance. This was one example with him. The bizarre arrogance of you get caught, you get a cover up, you don't change your behavior, okay, and you get caught again, and so it's like, come on, if you were coming before a judge, and you lied or you covered things up, they're going to look down on you. But I think that element, now you guys might not agree with my veracity on that, but Bill, what were you going to say?
Well, I was going to say, when Anita wanted to become judge, I didn't know her, had no knowledge of her. Nobody knew her. In fact, I had actually told Nathan Little I was going to support him and backed out. And he was kind of mad at me for that. And everything's okay now. But I went down and watched Anita in court. She was already a magistrate in municipal. I got to know her over the past few years. My personal assessment would be like trying to accuse Kevin Miles I don't look at Kevin Miles as an insider. I don't at all. I think he is unbiased and I think he's a fair judge. I feel the same way about Anita and all the experiences I've had with her, what I've seen of her. And I know the three of us disagree in this, and that's okay. You two have a different interpretation, but I've seen Anita outside of court and I've seen her in court. And I see very similarities between her and the way Miles runs his court. And she, I don't think, is an insider. I don't know what happened, why she didn't report it. I've never asked her. I've never called her. And I would think that should be something we encourage maybe to, at some point, reach out and ask, why did this not get reported?
Well, and here's the thing is, regardless of the personalities of the different judges, we all know, and they should all know in hindsight, Jesse Kramig lied. Whether the 100%. Other judges knew it, didn't know it, should have known it, all that kind of stuff. He lied, and the woman involved lied in an interview. That would be a good example of accountability. She lied in an interview with the sheriff. There's no accountability for that.
So let's go back to that. You go to the sheriff's department, a whole investigation was done on this thing, and it came back that it was clean. So, the judges, if I'm a judge in municipal and an investigation was done and all the right people, and it was done by an outside agency because Steve said, I'm not having anything to do with this. And I think it had a lot to do, I don't know, but my personal opinion is he saw it on Hicks Watchdog and he's like, I'm getting this out of my world. So he sent it out. So it's been investigated and all the things were looked into. And the judges got that report back and they saw, okay, there was no wrongdoing. Now, I'm not saying that report, I think, was a mess. I think there were things that were left out. The investigation, I believe, is where the real problem is.
So let's jump back just to clarify, because it'd be helpful for everybody. So almost all the investigation was done by the Clermont County Sheriff's Office. The Warren County Sheriff's Office did like 2 or 3 interviews. The reason why it got sent to the Warren County Sheriff's interview, because there had been a leak to the press that Chris Stratton had done a petition for Judge Kramig, and that was a conflict of interest on him being involved with the investigation.
What's funny about that leak to the press? That leak,
by the way, came from the prosecutor's office.
I was just about to say that.
The word on the street, and it's a pretty strong word on the street, is that Colby released that because there's more to this story. I don't know.
Well, you would not to interrupt, but you would, like if you request that notion that some reporter would out of the blue figure out who had done a part petition for Jesse Kramig for running for office at some point in time, this would be the kind of research we haven't seen in the press forever. That was handed to them. But my point is, what's funny about that whole episode is when you say the report, I would put forward there never really was a report. The funny thing is the investigation never established what exactly had happened. Okay.
Right.
And I feel like it came in with the perception, and I could say law enforcement people said to me, 2 consenting adults having sex isn't a crime, Chris. And I would say, if he used his position to get a subordinate to this, that's a crime.
Well, not on the
taxpayer's dime. In the courthouse, that's a crime. If they
not
did
on
it
the taxpayer's dime.
Go ahead, Louise.
Not on the taxpayer's dime. Right. Here's the problem. When let's explain to the people that are watching this. When there's an investigation that's being done for something that happens in the county, it's sent out to a neighboring county because of conflict of interest. Mark DeCarvey, our prosecutor, is the attorney for all the judges. People need to understand this. So if something is brought against one of the judges, Mark DeCarvey is their defendant. Okay.
So he has to recuse himself, but the sheriff's office doesn't necessarily need to do that.
So he's got to recuse himself, and because he does, it goes to a neighboring county for an investigation. Unfortunately, I think all 3 of us have had citizen affidavits filed against some officials, and it went to neighboring counties because of our political stand in the county, and we all know what it came back. There wasn't enough evidence. Well, doesn't that sound familiar? There wasn't enough evidence.
I'm going to say a phrase that we probably all know, but it's called forum shopped. Meaning a lot of times when people go get special prosecutors, like DeCalvey does or what have you, it's not a straight up deal. They know, they go get somebody that they know is going to do them a solid on how it's supposed to come out. And let's remember, the Warren County prosecutor who did the Jesse Kramig thing in 2023 was the same Warren County prosecutor that did Pat Monger. And then when Pat Monger got off with a literal slap on the wrist, almost nothing, and I respect him for this, I went to Victor Haddad and questioned this whole thing because there was a state auditor's report, and the amount of money involved in what Pat Monger had done was definitely felony territory times 5, and he got off on a slight misdemeanor. And then Haddad, which I take him at face value, told me that he had never seen that report. And if he had seen that report, he would not have agreed to the plea deal. So David Fornshaw, if I take at face value as true what Victor Haddad told me, that means that David Fornshaw withheld that information from a judge that resulted in a plea deal that, I'll make the example, if any of us worked for some government entity and were also outspoken and we did the same things, we would not get the plea deal that Pat Monger got. We would get
jail.
Strenuous thing. But my point is, this outside prosecutor thing that we talked about, visiting judges and special prosecutors, and it's these things are what's so pathetic and should make us all sad is that a lot of us have lost faith in almost all of our institutions, whether they be churches, whether they be government, frankly, that's not a conservative trait or a liberal trait. And that's why you see people doing crazy shit a lot of times, is because they're not grounded. They're not grounded in faith. They're not grounded in anything. And when you lose that on the court system, and when I had somebody call me yesterday and I asked them about a case, and they had been involved in this case for a long time. And I'm like, didn't you talk to me about this like a year ago? And I'm like, is this still going on? And they're like, oh yeah. Like, and the municipal side of it's like, well, why has it gone on so long? And it's like, well, let's just say the judge I had didn't have his mind on business. And, so that's where you start getting that whisper through the whole community of that these judges are not, the kind of people that are standing up. And frankly, Bill, you went into talking about the political system. In the political system, if we don't believe that judges should be beyond reproach, and we don't believe that the citizens are entitled to judges or beyond reproach, we're in a big trouble.
Oh, right.
I'd like to say that the one common thing that I've heard tonight is that there's no accountability for the justice system. So when it comes to judges, magistrates screwing up and not doing their job, there's no accountability. You can't hold them accountable. And God forbid if you point it out, because then, you're the one who's going to be in trouble. And as well as then there's no accountability to the initiator, the perpetrator, the accuser, and the liar. All these people are getting off because they lie. The people that should be having the law book thrown at them, it's not.
Well,
that's where the problem comes in.
I want to move on here, but you made me think of something. Is if my son did something wrong, I come down on him harder than, say, if he was at somebody else's house in the neighborhood, a parent that's not his parent. Okay. And we should come down harder on our own, and that we cannot have this kind of behavior. We need to, and maybe it's not that, maybe it's also, wouldn't it be interesting, Bill, to go ask Judge Beckman, what are we changing? And Stephanie Boyer, what are we changing in the system so this never happens again?
We've got to start cleaning up the system.
I think as part of their duty to the Central Committee that it supported them, every judge, they should go in front of the Central Committee and explain this. What happened? Right. That should be their. And
they don't have to reveal secret information, but they can talk about how we're trying to improve and fix issues in the court that might impair its credibility, that risk our ability to get our judges elected in the future.
So I want to address. There's a couple of things on the comments. One, Ed Carter. I think, isn't it my job to censor you because you're bringing up something about the founding fathers? Because I got Jeff Corcoran here. He's special guest in the background wherever, but he's back there. It's a little.
Hold on, I can look at the checks. So if I might not see all of them because it doesn't work perfect. But are you talking about this Ed Carter comment?
Yeah, he's saying Corcoran's saying we got to censor that comment, so we got to take that one down.
Okay, I'll delete it.
Not a lot of talk.
Number two, Robin Taylor says basically there's no punishment for any political persons. That's not true. There is There's sunshine laws in place, and there's also on judges, you can file a thing to the Supreme Court against a judge to have it reviewed. The problem is, Louisa, you and David Kell have filed how many of those against judges?
They're called grievances. So you can file with the Bar Association when it comes to an attorney, and then you can file with the Supreme Court when it comes to a magistrate or a judge. And basically, it comes back again, there were no findings. And
Every
that's
time.
a problem. That's a
Every
problem.
time. You're going to tell me every time that you filed a grievance between you and David Kell, there was never a problem with the situation? That's not true, because your passport was removed when it shouldn't have been. So now you talk about that extends all the way up to the Supreme Court.
I want to respond to this comment since you mentioned it, Bill. Is I want to say is no punishment for political persons. It depends on the political person. so it depends, and it's kind of an insider outsider thing. But it goes back to that. What was one of you brought up that kind of like in the retaliation? You started with retaliation, Louisa, or the whole point about like some people get a different treatment based on whether they have the red letter next to their name on the report.
Well, or who you're friends with. I mean, it's not just the red letter. I mean, unfortunately, in our county, the three of us, we don't rub shoulders with the right people. We say what's on our minds. We want to be transparent. We want to drain the swamp. And unfortunately, we are set aside. And just like yourself, Chris, you've been suspended from our political party. So going back to Robin, no, your statement is not accurate, because we involved politically in the Republican Party in Clermont County. And Chris Hicks has been suspended from our committee. And not legally, by the way. I mean, they're trying really hard, and he's having to fight it. So,
the system. Tom Brinkman told me a long time ago that the system will protect itself unless it gets something is so bad that it can no longer protect it. So I think Jesse Kramig getting caught a second time can't protect him anymore. Like
at that point, yeah. I mean, the evidence.
Yeah, but other than that, and he would always tell me it doesn't matter if they're Democrats or Republicans, they'll protect each other, because that's just
I thought
the
I
way
was watching
they're
an episode of Cheaters. It was hilarious. I mean, I'm like,
if Jesse Kramig had just been honest the first time round, and he had said, "Hey, you know what? I fell in love with the school. I'm going to get a divorce. She's going to get a divorce. It's none of my business." But when the entity,
when the answer is nothing happened, you go to a mouthpiece lawyer, Scott Croswell. You won't come and talk to the committee.
Right.
And let's be honest, you're protected by the leadership of the party to not have to answer questions of the committee.
Right.
Every time, it's so often, it's so stupid. If people would just come forward and just be honest, take your whipping, be done. I mean, it's instead of hiding it. Right. And that's, I think that it kind of goes back to what Ed had said. I think that we have no, I won't get into Christianity on this call, but I don't believe that our elected officials truly have a Christian moral compass any longer. They just, lying has become
They all certainly say they do.
Yeah. I mean, look at Archie Wilson. Bible thump, Bible thump, Bible thump.
So I'm going to put up here, because I want to get to wind us up here, because we're approaching an hour, and so our 30 minutes is blown to hell. Just so people know, the replacement recommendation meeting for Jesse Kramig is on Saturday, August 17th at 9 a.m. at the Republican building at 197 East Main Street in Batavia. And generally, unless they lock the doors, those are open to the public. And you sit over in the gallery section, not in the main section. There's a gallery section for observers. And you can see what kind of discussion takes place in the selection of the recommendation of the governor on who should replace Jesse Kramig. Okay, so with that, I think, hopefully, Bill, everybody's tuned in because they want to hear your update. Before we get to that, I want to put up here real quick this email address again, ClermontU@reformclermontgop.com. And, if there's a topic, if there's issues you're having, a specific court issue you're having, we can be part of the check and balance. I think you tried to do this, Bill, in the past, some is to be a check and balance on some of the stuff going on. I think, Louisa, you've tried to do that, but nothing. Here's what, what's that saying? Sunlight is the best disinfectant. And I tell you, a lot of the insider political class, they hate sunlight. Would you guys? That's not their favorite thing. They like to operate in the shadows as best they
like
can.
gremlins, right? They start dissolving when they get sunlight on them.
Okay, so
I think that's where we're heading. We're going to shine light on these people. That is exactly what we're going to do.
And hopefully provide some education along the way, and be positive towards reform in places. Now your update, I think I can actually drag you to the top here. It's not letting me. But Bill, you're going to update your update, and you have a famous thing of, last time I checked, I was 0 for 22.
Yeah.
I can't succeed at anything. And
wait a minute. You did succeed at one thing. You got Jesse Kramig. That's one for you.
Right. That's what we're going into. So for so long, Change Clermont would report on the, I would get bombarded with text messages the minute your court dates were up. Like every time there was a decision, Supreme Court decision, I'd get blown up by many of these are elected officials, or they just wanted to see that number go up. I mean, it became a funny thing. That number, everybody wanted to see that number just go up, and it was kind of a thing that that I would do, just get under your skin. I mean, that was the purpose of it, was to just kind of rub it in your face every time a decision would come out. But you've never gotten credit for anything. And there's been a lot. You go back to Aaron Neese, Joe Braun, Pat Munger. There's been a lot of wins that you haven't been given credit for. And I can't go back and fix that. But what I can do is, most recently, this Jesse Kramig thing. I got to give you a point for that. And I'll tell you, when I saw that cheater style, I mean, first I thought to myself, how stupid do you have to be to go to Union Township to meet the place where Chris Hicks lives?
Hold on, I'm gonna. You keep talking, but I'm gonna flip here because I think I was playing with this, and I think I set it up that it actually plays the video. Hold on, but you can keep talking.
I mean, how dumb do you have to be to go to Union Township, the place where Chris Hicks lives, and go to the park right here in that video? Go to the park. I'm like, you're 5 minutes from Chris Hicks's house down the street, and you're meeting this girl.
Getting satisfied in there.
That is the only thing I wish you had done. Is I wish you had snuck up a little more
to the window.
Video. Yeah. I mean, because man, and then
Talk
he took
about being caught red-handed.
I mean, how horrible is that he got away with it the first time? In my opinion, keep your head low. You got a lucky break the first time around, but to keep doing it and to come to Union Township, that is just like just to
kind of wrap us up here. The one thing, if you watch the funny thing is, it doesn't really show that much. It shows that it's I didn't know whether he would deny it again but had I had I'm not into this like dog the bounty hunter crap, but had I pulled the car up behind his car instead of on the side of it, and he couldn't have backed out, could you imagine what kind of cheater style video I'd have out of that? But you're right. And then people ask me, then it's like, I love my lovers that are like, what are you following them around? Stuff like this. No, I got a tip from a person that told me go to the park right now, and you're going to find them there. And I didn't know what Jesse Kramig's car was. So that's why I kind of make a lap. I was like, which car? And then it's like, I don't see anybody in a car, but I guess
the one
when you're this in a car, it's not as
and the one goes steaming up.
And I think Grand Cherokees are actually quite spacious. I've never owned a Grand Cherokee, but it's probably a recommendation for a Grand Cherokee.
The stupidity. How does a sitting judge and have such he has such a large background working for the Supreme Court?
I was so disappointed.
But what made me more mad about it is he sat up in front of our Central Committee with his wife and talked about what a family man he was.
Yeah.
And it was Archie Wilson.
Christian family man.
Yeah. And that to me, if you step down and admit your sin, I'm all for supporting you. I'm not going to sit and ride somebody that makes a mistake and falls short. We all fall short. We're all sinners. Fine. I get that. And I don't think you ride somebody, but somebody that's just continues in the sin and just doing it over. And it's like this whole thing with the Milford city manager.
Well, and I
Discuss
just want to also, I want to point out some of my failures recently. Since you've given me one, is we incremented it from 22 to 24 because of my failure on the disqualification of Judge Hine and my failure on so far on the central.
I had to give you two. We had to.
So I get 2 losses and 1 win. So I'm still, although my view is if we do this again or next time we do this and we look at your scoreboard, I want to go back and maybe look at some stuff there, because I tell people, if you, and you probably, Bill, you might feel the same way, or Louisa feel the same way, and you can get dejected and tired trying to clean things up per se. But if you're successful like 30% of the time in these kind of things where the system is largely inclined to not change, but not for that parking lot video, Jesse Kramig could still be a judge right now. That's good. That's good. So anybody that gets into like public records, trying to hold the system accountable, if you're successful 25, 30% of the time, that's actually a pretty good hit rate. And
can we quickly answer some of these questions that people are asking?
Are there more? Okay.
Before we go, I know Bill is saying, speaking of the road to a judgeship, isn't it a common route for just about all counties to go through the prosecutor's office? Not to say that this is proper, but it does show the knowledge and experience is found in the prosecutor's office. You know what? I have a difference of opinion. I think that if you're just a prosecutor and you become a judge, I don't think you have the heart of a defendant. And so when you have someone before you with some serious issues, you just want to throw them in jail. And that's not what we need for judges. I don't know if you guys have difference of opinions on that.
Just want to elaborate on that. I think Bill has a valid point, and I think the way you fix it is, we could put legislation in place in this state to say, if you are a prosecutor in county X, you can't be a judge in county X. You got to go to county Y.
Yeah.
So I think a way to fix this is, you can be in the prosecutor's office in advance, but you can't go and be a judge in the county you were a prosecutor's office in.
Being a judge with your old boss, being prosecutor or somebody, something like that.
Right.
Yeah.
We
go back to the buddy system.
If you were up on something, I think you'd feel better naturally just if the judge that was dealing with your case was had been on the other side, had to deal with people that are getting screwed by the system or getting, people used to say that Judge Jerry McBride, that he was a better judge on a lot of things because at one point he had been accused of an improper interest in a contract as a commissioner. So he at least had the experience of being on the accused side. Now, I will point out that Judge McBride also let David Ubel off, saying there was a venue issue with his charges when he made his purchases in the parking lot of a Home Depot in Clermont County. That just shows you how deep it can go in the system, where even somebody that I know a lot of lawyers that were just forever that changed their impression of Judge McBride because they thought of him as like you guys might not agree with this, but they thought of him as like on a higher plane, and then that happened. Okay, do we want to? I know I want to be done because I'm afraid of people getting tired. But there's
I know there's one more, Chris, and maybe we can tie this up in a minute. I don't know if you
is it this one. Which one?
Yeah. Is it Kyle or Kylie? I always say Kylie.
Kyle.
Okay, Kyle.
Yeah.
So my opinion.
Kylie. Let's start calling her Kylie just for the hell of it. But her name's Kyle.
I personally think that any central committee meeting at this point is a waste of time. I think you break the quorum and you take away power from Jeff back here. I think the best thing to do is to not, and I don't think there is any point of going, because all you're going to do is vote against the people that are coming to vote for a specific person. So I think breaking the quorum is how you fix that. But it's just a recommendation. I think what's going to happen, Gene Schmidt and Mike DeWine have a very close relationship. Gene Schmidt is very supportive of Nathan Little. I think there's going to be phone calls, and I think Nathan Little is going to be picked.
I don't know. I do think on the whole recommendation thing, I'll make a comment here, is that there's no greater helper to Jeff Corcoran than me, because not intentionally, but because the hatred of me is so great, that helps him to stay in power. And this thing about breaking the quorum and not showing up. If you are a person on the Clermont County Republican Central Committee, if you love me, you hate me, you love Bill, you hate Bill, you love Louisa, you hate Louisa. If you think that Jeff Corcoran can take the party forward, you are out of your effing mind. There is just no way that guy is going to be able to take the party forward, and everybody knows it. And the only reason he's allowed, if I, suddenly went up in a spaceship, and was gone, I think, people don't want to, see him go, because the people that are against him, they don't want them to have a victory. But the losers are the people in Clermont County, because we need to move the system. It was just that one example. Jesse Kramig was endorsed when it happened last year. It had already been endorsed because the filing deadline's goofy. It had already been endorsed. The stuff came out last year, and the leadership of the party prohibited us from being able to ask him any questions. They protected him from appearing at any meetings, and we deserved to be able to, ask him some questions as a committee, and to potentially reconsider his endorsement if we had.
Can I add something to that?
Yes.
I actually, as a committee member at the time when that happened, I had asked our vice chair that I would like to make a motion to have the endorsement
reconsidered.
And I got told, no. You know what? You are innocent until you are proven guilty. Well, yeah, we are, right? A year later. So
and you need to ask questions to know whether, and let's pretend that there was nothing illegal about what Jesse Kramig did. Let's just say that was true. Okay. I don't think that's true, frankly, but let's say it was true. Is that still, regardless of that, is that the character, morality, and ethics you want in a judge?
No.
Right? The girl was not per se young enough to be his daughter, but she was darn close to being young enough to be his daughter. And I always think about, I don't know her, never met her, but I think here's another young person, and what's her view going to be of Republicans? At some point, she's going to wake up and realize she got used. And who used you, And I think as Republicans, especially when it involves younger people, and especially when it involves judges, we need to be exemplars of the kind of principles that we say we stand for.
I'm sorry, I had to laugh. Someone just commented, Nikki Potts, not in Clermont County. You are guilty until proven innocent. You're quite right, Nikki. You know what? I have often said that in Clermont County, you are guilty until proven innocent. But first, you have to have the money to get the right attorney to prove you're innocent.
The right people.
Otherwise, you are screwed.
And I want to close on this thing, because we have gone way longer than we thought. I've become aware. I've had multiple attorneys tell me that they won't practice in Clermont County Municipal Court.
Yeah.
Because it's too dysfunctional. And that means that the people going into that court are not even getting the potential representation they could have, because, good attorneys, they can go work in Hamilton County, Warren County, Brown, they can go to other counties and have clients. And if they feel like cases get stretched out, don't get, they don't get justice, why bother to practice here? Okay. Just for sake of time, I think we need to close, and I'm going to want to fire up here. Reminder for everybody that on August 31st from 10 to noon at the Miami Township Library, which is at 5920 Buckwheat Road in Milford, we are having a roundtable panel about the Clermont GOP and reform. And right now that includes Bill Thomas, myself, and Dennis Cooper. Byron Baxter had said he would participate, but he can't make that date. So he will not be participating, I guess, unless the schedule changes.
Yeah. If you got family in for Labor Day, bring them.
We've invited Commissioner Painter and Mr. Corcoran to participate as well. And hopefully one or both of them will participate. And everybody's invited to that. And hopefully it'll be a good time. And then beyond that, I just want to say thank you to everybody. I put it up in the corner here. Bill, Louisa, any quick closing comment that each of you want to make? Let's start with you, Bill.
The biggest thing, it was one of the purposes of Friends of Liberty, and it's why I'm supporting this movement, is every person should be involved in this county that votes. Whether it's to be on Central Committee, get educated. The most important thing you can do is know what's going on, because if you don't know what's going on and you lay with your head in the sand, and then it's too late once the ship has sailed, the people are elected, we can fix the problems by changing the people that are elected. And you know what, you're like, what can I do? I can't serve on Central Committee. That's fine. What you can do is get educated by attending these meetings, going to the meetings, and then educating other people that may be able to serve on Central Committee, or passing the word around that, hey, you know, don't vote for Claire Corcoran because she doesn't show up to work. You know, I think that it's important for you guys to all be involved. And that was why I had Friends of Liberty, was to try to encourage people to be involved in some movement. No matter what you are interested in, we all should be interested in the integrity of our government and our elected officials in this county. So get involved. That's my advice.
Well, and I want to just add to what you said is also push for things like, my closing comment, we push for things like candidate forums, where politicians have to answer questions before a group of people, not one-on-one. You know, you have people like Mark DeColby, who's never had an election opponent in any primary or general election. That doesn't make for better elected officials. The campaign and having to answer questions and having competition makes you clarify your thinking as to how you're going to be a prosecutor and what you're going to do. So part of it is making sure our elected officials are actually, you know, kind of held to a test of asking questions and so forth. So Louisa, closing comment.
Well, same thing with Bill. The reason why I was part of Friends of Liberty was to try and make a difference for our county. Being in the judicial system for such a long time, I've learned a lot. But same thing, you need to get involved. You need to know who you're voting for. Get to know who these candidates are. Find out, read, ask questions. That's the only way we're going to clean our county. You know, I say it all the time. If you don't clean it at county level, it goes all the way up to Washington, D.C.
They get trained locally when then they go national.
We set precedents for what we have up in Washington, D.C. And ultimately, it's the people's fault. People that don't get involved, people that don't find out and don't the issues that we have. You know, the other thing is find candidates. Find people to run up against these other people so we can break this, you know, diving buddy system. Hey, you know what? You my buddy. Why don't you run for commissioner? Hey, right. You my buddy. Why don't you run for chair of the Central Committee? And then we have disastrous events because we don't have people that are capable.
Well, let's give an example real quick before we wrap. Jeff Corcoran, I think when he ran for Central Committee chair, Byron was running against him. That Byron dropped out. I don't believe there was an opponent to Jeff Corcoran.
No, there was no opponent.
So these people end up in deals, and it doesn't necessarily, you know, you need to have that difference of opinions and difference of discussion.
And that, by the way, Chris, was rigged all the way from Goshen Township precincts all the way up to the Central Committee. But honestly, integrity, honesty, and transparency is what we stand for. And we all have that common ground. You people need to get involved, tell people about this podcast, let them get involved, get educated, and find candidates, please.
All right.
Thank you.
So with that, I'm going to say good night. Thank you, guys. And look for the next time we're doing a Clermont U. If you have a topic that you want to bring up, I'm going to flip back to here. Clermont U at reformclermontgop.com. Clermont U at reformclermontgop.com. Thank you guys for being, hopefully, you know, you are the best panel that has ever been on one of these Clermont U videos. By far, no question. Now, it also happens to be the first one. So
we'll make it better next time.
And thank you, everybody, for joining in the chat. Thanks.
Thanks, everybody, and good night.